According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, approximately 20% of new businesses fail during the first 2 years of being open, 45% fail during their first 5 years, and 65% fail during their first 10 years. Only 25% of new businesses make it to 15 years or more. In this episode of Durand on Demand, we'll explore the 5 reasons why entrepreneurs fail and how you can avoid these traps. Stay tuned till the end.
I refuse to stay in a victim mentality. I gotta stand and fight for my honor and my family. That's how I did it, cause you know that's how it had to be. So now I'm slaying dragons and I do it happily. I told them I refuse to be another casualty. I looked inside the dragon's eyes and then I told them casually, hi, I'm a dragon slayer and I got a dragon lair. I'ma go and slay a dragon, then I'm gonna dragon here. I don't care, I ain't scared. Look inside my heart and there's a lion there. Conquering my dragons, I ain't fighting fair.
So the 5 reasons entrepreneurs fail. Dave, what is the first on the list?
The first on the list, and these are in no particular order. In fact, as I get down to the 5th one, that might be the weightiest one. The interesting thing about this, Nico, is that each person, according to their own natural gifts that they bring to the table, will suffer from one of these or the other. So you might be a person who's like, oh, I don't do 1, I don't do 2, I don't do 3, I don't do 4, 5, although you probably would not admit that you do 5. Okay, and you'll know what I mean when I get there. The first one is creating problems. This is absolutely a problem. Self-inflicted injury you see happen to entrepreneurs on a regular basis. You can imagine if an athlete, a professional athlete, were to wake up in the morning and take a hammer and hit his Achilles tendon. I mean, why would anybody do that? That's going to take them out of the game. But in some way or another, we have a tendency to do these sorts of things as human beings, and particularly as I'm talking about entrepreneurs. Now, I do want to be very clear about something. If you're not an entrepreneur, but you're a leader of any type, most of these are going to apply in one way or another to what you're doing. So you don't need to tune out if you haven't started or built your own company. If you're leading anything, these are going to apply. But the first one is creating problems. Those problems are physical, relational, financial, and addictions. And I see this all the time. In 35 years of building businesses and leading entrepreneurs, it is a tragedy when something happens physically to a person that they didn't actually self-inflict, whether it's an accident or something like that. But when people do these things to themselves, you see tremendous regret in the person. Quite often you'll see the person who's the alcoholic or smoked, and they just can't free themselves from the addiction. And I have tremendous empathy for this, by the way. So I'm not making a judgment, I'm making an analysis, which is a very different thing, because a person who's stuck in an addiction like that really just needs prayer, compassion, and help. You know, there may be somebody in their life that needs to give them the tough love side of it, but that's not my job. So what happens, though, is when they know this was self-inflicted, and now they all of a sudden are at this place where they have disease, and they are trying to turn this around, you can see this overwhelm kind of hit them like, wow, the seriousness of this circumstance, if I could change it and go back, I would. I would regret this. So it's something to keep in mind. But there are more subtle things than those bigger ones, like just constantly eating unhealthy foods and carbohydrates and therefore gaining weight. Now, we can see that, oh, wow. Oh, Dave, are you talking about self-inflicted problems for entrepreneurs, like somebody having a heart attack? Well, yeah. Somebody having cancer because of what they've done in their diet. Sure, I am. But I'm actually talking about other things that are more pervasive than those that become very big at the end like that. The pervasive things that take place would be low energy, foggy brain, slowness because of bad diet, because of addictions. Those things really become problematic. So you want to think of yourself in optimal health. You know, what's so crazy is people will pay attention to their car like, oh, I got to change the oil. You know, like, I just went over 3,000 miles. I feel the empathy and pain of my car because I'm at 3,001 mile, which, by the way, isn't even really true itself. You can go much longer than that. But anyway, so I'm going to take care of that. My Keurig needs to be descaled. I'm taking care of this. Is that what it's called, descaled?
No idea.
I think it's called descaled. You can leave that in there. I don't remember. I know that it's like, I think it's descaled. Uh-huh. Anyway, so they're on it because they just can't let equipment not operate effectively. They're updating their computers all the time, but yet they're literally feeding their body something that actually is the thing that drives the car, that uses the Keurig and uses the computer, but they're feeding it like sand in its gas tank and just destroying its ability to operate at an optimal level. So you have to think about optimal performance. Optimal performance doesn't mean, trying to be like the beach body or these different types of things, but it's to say, how can I have prime effectiveness in what I do? Relationships, you see this too. There are some tragic things that happen in a relationship because if you have a one-on-one relationship with somebody, you only have 50% of the power in that relationship. You can't control the other person. But when a person self-inflicts and they're the one that's causing strain in the relationship, either by harming the relationship with selfishness, callous, whatever, bad, poor behaviors and activities, this is very, very problematic. And it's very avoidable. And these things take people out of the game all the time. Now, you may say, it took the person out of the game because all of a sudden now they went through a divorce and they were struggling and they entered into depression. And so they're literally out of the game for a month or two or a year or whatever. Yes, that is also very true. But I'm talking about the pervasive stuff, which is the strain of the relationship on a daily basis, even before it hits that level. See, when a person is in that sort of strain and you want to sit down and talk to them about a marketing meeting or, ordering some product or supplies or arranging something, they're saying to themselves, this is so unimportant compared to what I'm actually dealing with when I go home that I can fake enthusiasm for it, but I'm really not that interested in it. If we're going to be effective in the workplace, we have to try to get the rest of our life actually in order. And we also have to understand this about work. Our work heals the rest of our life. Nobody's ever said, my financial life was out of order, and so I neglected my work and it got better. My relationships are out of order, so I neglected my work and they got better. Even my physical health, sure, sometimes we have to pay attention to acute circumstances to take us out of the game. But for the most part, our work heals relationships because we are more productive. We feel better about ourselves. We're more respected. We're contributing in a way. It heals our physical health because if we take it seriously, this is one of these, is it correlation or causation? In fact, I did commentary a little while ago on how the wealthiest people in the United States are married with children. And how a lot of people will advocate this. If you want to build your wealth, stay single until you're 35, and then you'll have your wealth, and then get married. And when I said, hey, listen, and I just quipped it. I wasn't like literally, deliberately saying this, but I said, hey, really, if you want to be rich, even if you don't like kids, or get married and have kids anyway, because you're going to be wealthier just by way of demographic. Well, I had somebody say, this is a great example of correlation, not causation. But it really actually isn't. And the reason that it isn't is because when you are married with kids, it causes you to behave in a way that increases your level of responsibility. So this is one of those unusual things where you can scientifically say that correlation is true, but so is causation to a degree. And so it's a little bit more in depth than just saying it's one or the other. Okay, when it comes to creating problems, the problems that we get into do start to get in the way of the solutions that we have in the workplace. So we have to just remember that we want to have our life in order so that we don't have to deal with the additional stresses of life when we're entering into the workplace. We can just get things done. Because frankly speaking, you're going to have problems in life no matter what, even if you're behaving the right way, even if you're eating the right way, even if you're exercising the right way. And we just don't want to self-inflict them. And I've just noticed also that the self-infliction of these things creates a greater level of stress than when they just kind of happen to occur to us, because the guilt from bringing them on ourselves, it takes some mind share. It rents space in our heads.
Definitely been there and done that. And, it's funny. You had a great video recently on 7 keys or 7 steps to become a man in your 20s, from boy to man. And I think you touch on a few of these things. Not creating those problems for yourself is implicit in that video. Definitely recommend for our listeners to check that out on Dave's YouTube channel. But without getting too distracted here on the conversation, Dave, what is the second reason why entrepreneurs fail?
They're cowards in regards to facing the truth. Now, a lot of people talk about, you can just be afraid as an entrepreneur, but I would, I like to provide advice or analysis that is usable. So when somebody says something like, you need to believe to achieve, or you need to be more courageous, if I don't know how to do that, I don't know, well, what do I do with that? Okay, convince myself I'm courageous when I'm not? No. So I like to show people how to get there and where the actual root problem is. Almost all of the fear that we have when we're about to enter into an entrepreneurial idea or to take risk comes from the fact that we're afraid of the truth. So we're either closed-minded or we're naively open-minded. The naively open-minded person is like, oh, I'm going to be great at this. I'm just going to run this great business. You have advice for me? Great. Let me just take your advice. Why? Because you're an advice giver. I also mentioned this, by the way, in the video, people at 20s, is like, is reading good? And, the reflexive response is yes, no. Reading is only good if you're reading good material by good authors. Otherwise, reading is really, really bad, and it's going to poison your brain. So it's the same sort of thing. Like, what are you being open-minded to? Who's giving you the advice? Where does it come from? Is it actually effective? Or are they just spouting out things because they want to feel important and you're prime bait for them as a charlatan, So don't be afraid of the truth. A lot of the truths that are out there are related to your ability to do something, the viability of your product or service. I'm going to get into those things in a little bit. But they are also things that have to do with like the overall worldview and market view. So a lot of this in today's day and age happens to be like political, like on the left or the right. Like in order to run a great business, our great business needs to adopt these leftist philosophies. Okay, because otherwise we're going to be shunned and people aren't going to like us. Or, on the other hand, a person is like, in order for me to do well, I need to fight against everything that the people on the other side of the fence say, and so I'm going to be ultra this or ultra that. That generally doesn't work. Now, you've heard me say before, Nico, that being extreme actually is good. Okay, but directing your extremeness toward the right things is the thing that matters. Like if you are extreme about something totally irrelevant, or you're extreme about something completely wrong, that's bad extreme. But if you are extreme about having a high level of success, extreme about having a high standard, extreme about your schedule so that you can be effective in what you do, extreme about the truth, that matters, okay? Then you're going to do well. But you can't be afraid of the truth. You can't be afraid of data when it hits you. You can't be afraid to hire somebody because you think that they have a political opinion that is different than yours, and that automatically that's going to discredit them from every single thing they do in the workplace. It's just not true.
Hey there, Giant. Dave Durand here, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our brand new e-newsletter where you will get the best of the best tips and insights to unlock the giant in you, build an empire, and slay some dragons. Sign up below. Let's go slay some dragons.
And before we get into the third, fourth, and fifth point, I want to point you to our Durand On Demand merch site here, my coffee cup, Durand On Demand. Check it out on leadinggiants.com. We have a bunch of cool swag for you guys. All right, Dave, what is point number 3 on the 5 reasons entrepreneurs fail?
It sounds like this. I'm the best. Nobody can do what I do. Oh my goodness. I see this one at such an unbelievably high level. This is not a peripheral thing. This is not a small thing. This is not an out there thing, like a fringe sort of thing. This is usually the solopreneur. The solopreneur is the person who, they're the marketing person, the salesperson, they produce everything. They're the accountant. They're the janitor. They're doing every role. And they're so fond of themselves that they don't think anyone can do anything like they can't even clean the toilets as good as me. They can't do the accounting as good as me. They can't do the selling as good as me. You know what? Every single thing that you're doing, even the thing that you're the specialist in, somebody can do better. There's no doubt about it. Somebody can do it better. And you see this trap. It's not just, I would say this, it's a long-term reason that people fail. A solopreneur can usually stay in the dissatisfaction of the grind for a period of time, because in order to say nobody can do this like me, you have to have an enormous amount of pride. And that pride gets them to not quit. which does get them to like try to prove to the rest of the world they were right for doing the idea in the first place. But it also makes them like victims, which is a very, very juxtaposition, because generally speaking, the entrepreneur who takes on responsibilities themselves has a completely different attitude than a victim attitude. But here it shows up as a victim attitude. Why does it show up that way? Well, because nobody's good at this like me, so I have to do everything myself. Now, I'm a victim of the world's circumstance. You know what I'm a victim of? I'm a victim of being the only perfect person around here. And I suffer from perfectness because I'm around everybody else's imperfection. And so they're working all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to get things done in dissatisfaction, but trying to prove to the world they were right about their idea in the first place, so they continue to do it for a long period of time until they see their family grow up, until they see other entrepreneurs who actually did something that they could have done, which is to delegate responsibilities and build their organization the right way. They see their freedom, and eventually they quit. For the most part, the person who has become addicted to this mentality for a really long period of time, they're hard to convert. So the conversion of this person has to come early, generally speaking, to heal them. It can come later, but it mostly comes early. The reason it becomes more and more difficult to heal a person from this mentality as the years build is because they need to justify the reason that they did it that way for as long as they did it that way. And the only way they can possibly justify it is to prove you wrong by doing things that are silly. I would say this to people that I'd work with all the time. Listen, here's how you can do this. Here's how you can succeed. Here's the methods for it. And they say, well, that doesn't work. And I said, well, just want you to know, you hold the trump cards there. If you want to prove that you will fail, or you want to prove that you will have no freedom or no time, you can prove it to me. You will be wrong, by the way, but you hold all of the power to make it look like you're right. And I won't debate that with you. If you're going to be closed-minded in this capacity, you win. You win. You get the prize of having a miserable life. Okay? But if you want to free yourself from that, I'll help you. And I'll show you how other people can do it better. But this idea that nobody can do what you do is abundantly wrong. I've given the example many times. In fact, there are a lot of examples of it. I'll give another one. I remember one time I had an employee. It wasn't even a partner. It wasn't somebody else. They were convincing me 24 hours a day that their job was super hard to do. And they couldn't get it done. They needed a full-time assistant in order to get it done. And I knew what the role was so well. And finally, I just had to let him go. And there's a conversation I've had with several people where I'm like, listen, just so you know, the more that we're sitting down and you're telling me you can't do your job, I'm telling you you can do your job. I believe in you. You're telling me that it can't be done. And I just want you to know that by the time we're done with this conversation, one of us is going to be right. And if you convince me you can't do your job, I got to let you go and find somebody who can do it. So just be careful with how enthusiastically you're convincing me you can't do your job. Okay? In a job interview, hey, do you think you could do the job? No. Well, you're not going to get the job. Now you're in the job. And I'm saying, you think you can do the job? No. Okay, well, then you can't keep the job. Anyway, I did replace her, and I hired, she was a college graduate, by the way, with like 8 years of working experience. I hired a 19-year-old who was in tech school part-time. They worked 20 hours a week, not full-time. And literally by Tuesday, at like halfway through the day, they said, okay, I did everything on the list. I looked at the quality of their work. They got done more in a day and a half than the person did full-time with higher quality work. And it's that easy. Well, it's not always that easy, but I should say that when you want to prove something is hard, you always hold the trump cards and you can make it look super hard, even when it's not.
You know, it's funny. I just had a conversation with someone about this very thing, and their reasoning, rather than saying I'm the best at what I do, was I really like this one thing, therefore I don't want to let it go. And then they've reframed what success is in their entrepreneurial endeavors. What do you have to say to someone like that, Dave, that just reframed success to kind of fit their situation, I guess?
Oh, it's a self-justification. It's a complete self-justification. The way that I look at success. Now, by the way, there, to a certain degree, I mean, this makes sense. To one person, success is having, a certain amount of money and a certain amount of fame or wealth or a certain number of followers or whatever it is. And those things, I suppose they could be successful according to what it is you're doing. They're measurements of success. But on the other hand, a successful person is a person who follows the proper calling that they have, and they become fully who they are supposed to be. That's really ultimately successful. That's going to be different for a teacher than it is an entrepreneur, different for an actor than it is. I mean, are you a successful actor because you won all sorts of awards as an actor, or are you a successful actor because you literally enter into that character in a way that no matter what audience is watching, they are fully convinced that you are that person? I would say that that's the greater measurement of actual success as an author or as an actor, when in reality, the other one might be a greater measurement of accolades, right? So it is true that, defining certain things like this makes sense. The problem with the type of person that you're talking about is that they would, instead of saying, well, what really makes a successful actor isn't that they're so good at their character that the audience is fully convinced and engaged in them. It's actually the way that they study the script ahead of time. Really? No, it's not. But it's because you're failing to actually do the thing that makes you successful, that you had to redefine it into something that's completely irrelevant. And what is this? It's a self-justification.
That's good. Not to derail the conversation too much, Dave, but I just recently watched the Sly documentary, and he talked about how he spent so much time trying to find the perfect role when he had already found it with Rambo and Rocky. Yeah. And as the years went by, he had a lot of misses with his films. Anyways, to make a long story short, now that his kids are grown up, he misses the fact that he... or regrets the fact that he didn't spend as much time with his kids in pursuit of whatever it was that he was pursuing at the time.
I haven't seen the documentary, but I've heard peripheral interviews from him on that. It appears from the outside like he's trying to make up for some of that time.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with the loss of his son, which is pretty tragic. Moving on to the 5 reasons entrepreneurs fail. What is number 4, Dave?
You just can't find good people. Now, this, I suppose, is related to the idea that I'm the best, nobody can do what I can do. But when people say you just can't find good people, they also say things like, or trust them. Everybody's out to rip you off. Everybody's out to get you. If you try to find a good person, they're just going to quit. They're not going to be responsible. This is actually really detrimental for a person to say, because without knowing it, to a person who has been effective and successful as an entrepreneur, the effective, successful entrepreneur knows exactly what's actually taking place when they say that. And what they're really saying is, I'm a poor leader. I cannot attract people. I cannot train them effectively. I cannot effectively delegate. I can't inspire them, and I can't retain them. And straight up, I'm going to tell you right now, if you are saying you just can't find good people and you can't trust them, this is really on you. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy to do, and it doesn't mean that because you're a successful entrepreneur, you can wave a magic wand and put an ad out there online for people to respond to, and the first person that comes in, you can just, find them and have them do well. I mean, Nico, to find you, I went through tons of interviews, and I just couldn't find a really good fit. The difference between the entrepreneur that fails and succeeds is the entrepreneur that fails therefore says, you can't find good people. End of story. And I was like, no, I know they're out there. There's going to be someone. Look at how big the world is. And then all of a sudden, here you appear. Now, it could have turned out that you were not who you said you were, and that you wouldn't have been getting the job done. And if that would have been the case, it would have been hugely disappointing, but I would have had to find somebody else and get the job done. And that's just what you do. But the person who fails at this never would have found you in the first place, because they would have not even placed the ad or reached out to people to try to find somebody. And if they did, the first person that comes along that they don't like, they think that they represent everybody on earth, or the first person that they hire, if they work out, represents how all people are bad. And these things are just not true. Not to mention the fact that you can actually, if you're an effective leader, you can bring in relatively ordinary, average people and help them show the way to their extraordinary behaviors and habits. And you can create a culture and environment that makes them perform at levels they've never performed before in life. And that's also pretty exciting.
Yeah, a testament to that is funny. I feel like I've accomplished more in 3 months than I've accomplished in 4 or 5 years of my career, in my previous job.
You've done fantastic work, and I don't have anything to compare that to in your past. I can just say that you're on a rocket ship, and one of the reasons is because you are fueling this thing, and it's awesome.
So what is the 5th reason here for 5 reasons that entrepreneurs fail, Dave?
It's related to I'm the best, and nobody can do what I can do, but it has to do with their ideas. My marketing approach is the best approach. My product idea is the best approach. My service idea is the best approach. I have been working with somebody who's driving me crazy. Not in my own company. They were contracted to build a facility that I have. And this particular person, and I would always protect somebody's make it anonymous in this, but is horrible to work with because they do all of these things. They're gravely irresponsible. They're so unorganized that they miss meetings. They don't write notes down. They're constantly saying, "You never told me that." So you're constantly having to re-show them the text, re-show them the email, which proves that you actually did. So they're unorganized, they're irresponsible, they're totally dishonest. They lie all the time. You cannot trust anything that they're doing. Now, that's one thing. The flabbergasting thing is that when you interact with other people who interact with this particular person, including his partner, they will tell you that these are the behaviors of this person universally with everyone. And at a certain point, people are a little hoodwinked. You know what he actually said to me? He said, "I warned you when you signed the contract that he would be this way." Like, to his own detriment as a partner, he was warning me against doing something. That is a fascinating circumstance to be in as a partner. The point to this is that it is well known with anybody who works with this person, and he just happened to have a product that I needed in the place, or a facility in the place that I needed it, and access to things to get it done. Or I wouldn't have, the warning signs would have been like, okay, I'm just not going to do this. But I decided, well, it's probably my only choice. I'm going to try to do this as best I can, at least choice for the efficiency that I needed. So I went into it. All of that is a way of building up to when I finally had conflict with this person. I said, just so you know, this conflict is not going to happen anymore. This is how this is going to take place, to the detriment of this person's situation from a legal perspective, because we've been pushed to that level. He said, "Dave, just so you know, everyone likes me. Everyone loves the work that I do. Nobody ever says what you're saying or complains about it. I will tell you, to a mark of perfection, there is not a single person I've interacted that interacts with him, and this is quite a few people, who has ever admired the work that he does, and who doesn't almost set each other off where you have to go, you know what, let's just not be emotional about this and calm down and let's just get the job done. We already know the facts about this person. It doesn't do any good to gossip or be angry. Let's just get the job done." But it's difficult when you're around all sorts of people who are equally frustrated by it, because you want to kind of vent, but it elevates the frustration of venting. The reason this is so important is because he thinks his ideas are so good in the midst of everybody saying they're not. And these are ideas about organization and everything else too. When we get so prideful about the way we go about things, or we get super prideful about the product that we have, frankly, I've worked with artists this way, who their art is, first of all, I have something in the ballpark of just under 100 designers that just work for one of my companies. So I'm very familiar with people in art and design. I have great admiration for what they do. They're very good at this, and I am not. So generally speaking, the way that I interact with them is this way. "What do you want, Dave?" "I want it to kind of feel and look like this." And they're like, "Okay, let me get back to you." Because I don't know how to even do that. Sometimes I don't know how to articulate what that means. And they bring it back to me. And when they're good at what they do, I'm like, that is better than I could have possibly imagined it. Great job. Or if it's not, you say, well, I was actually because a lot of times it's on you then. It's like, well, I didn't give you the feel like I should have. Make it a little more sophisticated. Make it a little bit more rugged. Make it a little bit more of this or that. And then they go back and they're like, oh, in light of that. And they come back and you're like, that's amazing. But then there are some people where the designs are really, really bad. They're like equal to the American Idol singer who can't sing but claims they can. And when they come back, you feel bad almost. Like you're like, this person obviously is not good at this. And yet this is what they're doing. So you want to be kind of gentle with it. But when you're like, well, you know what? It doesn't quite look like really, can we bring it a little bit more into this angle? They get defensive. That's the difference. The other person's not defensive. They're like, tell me what you mean and I'll go do it. And they come back with it. The person who's not qualified to get it done is the person who defends their low quality work at a way higher level than other people. I think it is a very good idea for us not to be the judge of the quality of our work. When I get done with a speech or a book and somebody says, what do you think of it? I'm like, well, I'm not the one to ask. Like literally you have to ask the people that I present it to. They have a much better way of telling. Here's what you don't ask. Don't ask my immediate family members, okay? And don't ask me because we're biased. Ask the people who don't know me, who happen to come by and see what I had to provide, and they'll tell you. And then you have to conform it to that. Now, that's not true on all things like, particular speech. I mean, if your speech was about how people need to make change and people don't like being called to making change, they're going to say, I hated your speech. Why? Because it reflected on who they are and what they need to do. So there are certain circumstances where feedback is valuable because it's negative. That means you did your job. But then there are other times where the feedback, needs to be positive as an affirmation you did your job effectively.
Hey there, Giant. Thanks for watching Durand On Demand. I need your help with something. The world desperately needs more Giants. You know it, and I know it. We've been around a lot of people struggling, figuring out how to make things go. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with as many people as you can. We're going to build this audience, and we're going to help people slay dragons together.